Hi. I am Rags. I am a dog. And today I will be reading an article. It's a very bad article. It's full of things that are wrong, full of a lot of vitriol, honestly. You could feel it seething, just boiling underneath the surface. Just this rage and this hatred for people. People like me. People like you. People who think that actually, maybe a lot of this new Disney Star Wars stuff is actually really bad, and it's very disrespectful and poorly written. You'll see exactly what I mean as we progress forwards. I am convinced at this point that the CBR.com is a Disney shill website. You'll see what I mean. Come along with me. We'll take a journey together through this article, and maybe we'll touch on a few more if those are references. I don't know if that'll happen. I make no claims. Let's begin. Obi-Wan Kenobi proves there's no way to please the Star Wars fandom. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series is complete on Disney+, but it begs the question if there is any possible way for Lucasfilm to please the Star Wars fandom. Let's take a short trip down memory lane. Remember when The Rise of Skywalker came out? Because I do. What a time that was. The Rise of Skywalker came out, and everyone hated it. Everyone sane hated it. And there emerged from the internet discourse, and I use the term discourse with liberal quotations, there came out of that internet discussion surrounding The Rise of Skywalker the idea that if you didn't like The Last Jedi, then you should like The Rise of Skywalker. After all, they would say, these simpletons, they would say The Rise of Skywalker is everything you wanted. Because if you didn't like The Last Jedi, obviously anything that's different from it is something that you want. Because there is a large swath of people on the internet, particularly as I've noticed in Star Wars discourse, who are not intelligent, who don't know how to think through things, who can't understand that not everything is a binary of one or the other. Many people, many people, hate both of these movies, TLJ and Tross. They hate them both. I'm one of those individuals. I hate The Last Jedi, and I hate The Rise of Skywalker. They're both horrible, terrible, awful films. I hate them for their own reasons, individually, because they're two very different movies. They both suck. Just because something is different than The Last Jedi, and I hate The Last Jedi, doesn't mean I'm going to like this other movie. This is a basic aspect of just logic that most people are able to grasp in their infancy, that I suppose Star Wars is... a lot of Star Wars defenders just don't seem to grasp. It's sad to see, but it seems to be the truth. It's a way to avoid any attempt at actually discussing the merits and the issues and the problems with these films. What? You didn't like this Brussels sprout? Here's an octopus. Surely you will like the octopus, because it's the opposite of Brussels sprouts. I don't actually know what the opposite of Brussels sprouts is, and, for the record, I love octopus. It's very good. I kind of like that it's a bit chewy. Lets you really savor that taste for longer. Alright, Joshua M. Patton, take us through this journey, what I sure will be a highly intellectual and wise series of paragraphs on the thought process leading to this interestingly titled article. Tell me that if Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Obi-Wan Kenobi Shobi, did not appeal to someone, then obviously they cannot be pleased. Which is kind of the fun implication of this title. If you didn't like Obi-Wan Kenobi the Shobi, then you just can't be pleased. You won't like anything if you don't like Obi-Wan Kenobi show. The explosive Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 1 finale. And it was very explosive. It sort of stretches the definition for what I would maybe consider explosive, but alright. The Season 1 finale delivered an epic Star Wars tale that tied together the original and prequel trilogies. I agree, it did tie them together. It tied them together in the same way that you could maybe fasten two large boulders to each other using cheese string. It creates so many obvious plot problems and blatant inconsistencies between the original and the prequels that you shouldn't even have to have these people who write... These people write articles on Star Wars for a living. And in a way, I kind of do the same. I make videos talking about Star Wars as part of my living. The difference, though, between Joshua M. Patton and myself, Rags the Dog, is that I know what the fuck I'm talking about. And I'm not just going to consume the franchise and feel the need to defend it at every turn. I look at a thing for what it is, and if it's bad, it's bad. And you explore why it's bad, as I have done at length with my friendos over on Every Frame of Pods, the podcast that I run, where we watched all of the Kenobi show and offered our reactions too. If you have not seen those, I will link them in the description. You can check them out. They're very fun. It highlights all of the issues with the show, for which there are many, many problems. However, it is possible that Joshua M. Patton will, maybe he'll change my mind. Maybe, just like the last guy I covered, maybe Kenobi's been amazing this whole time. But unlike the last guy, hopefully we'll actually get some arguments. Maybe we'll get some good info, some good details on scenes that maybe we misinterpreted or forgot about, and some details we maybe didn't see. I'm not going to hold my breath on that, though, because these people don't tend to deal with absolute truths about reality, but they do tend to deal in emotions and dismissal and name-calling. So we'll see what happens. Maybe Joshua will be pleasantly surprising, though I doubt it. Because he has to convince me with this article that Star Wars fans who don't like Kenobi, and who don't, I suppose by extension, Star Wars fans who didn't like most of the Star Wars content coming out, are being unreasonable, or that they have unrealistically high expectations. Never mind, I wonder how they got those expectations for Star Wars. Maybe they've been holding on to them for too long, which might be the part where we agree. If you have high expectations for Star Wars at this point, I do think your expectations are high. However, I'm just hoping Star Wars can reach the point of mediocrity, but I don't think it'll be able to clamber up that slope. Alrighty, he says the series brought fan favorite Ewan McGregor back to the galaxy far, far away. Indeed, a fan favorite, Ewan McGregor. I wish he tried a bit harder in a lot of these scenes, but he did fine overall, I think. Something fans have been asking for since Disney purchased Lucasfilm in 2012. However, looking at the discourse in reaction to this Disney Plus series, it seems there's simply no pleasing the Star Wars fandom. And here we go. If you... he talks about this show specifically. Specifically. The discourse in reaction to Kenobi, Season 1, specifically, has shown that there's no pleasing the Star Wars fandom. Which is amazing, right? Because there might be some shows that... I wouldn't agree with this for any one thing in particular. But if you'd said something like, if you'd used a different example, let's take The Prestige, or The Lord of the Rings, or Empire Strikes Back, or just fill in the blank famously good film, right? If you used one of those examples, like, I'd get what you were saying. I would assume that you were using this to say, like, if I went to someone and said, "What? You didn't like The Prestige? Do you like anything?" That's like a tongue-in-cheeky sort of joke that I'm making at somebody's seemingly bizarre standards for films. It would have been more accurate if I said, you didn't think it was good. You didn't think The Prestige was good? Geez. Do you think any film is good? That'd probably be more accurate, right? Because you'd understand the point. The Prestige is such a good movie that if someone doesn't think that's good, it does call into question their standards. Kenobi is not a show that I would ever use as a baseline litmus test for reasonable quality standards. Not by a long shot. All right, let's see. For 16 years, kids who saw the original trilogy in theaters only had 6 hours of Star Wars. This is interesting. In 1999, George Lucas doubled the amount of hours fans had to peer into their favorite galaxy. The reaction at the time was not positive. I don't know why you would use hours here as a way to... I don't know. I hope the hour count will come into play later, because if you're just saying... Here's a very mild curiosity I have. Is he going to use the argument that you're getting more Star Wars? Why would you have a problem with that? You're getting more. Which I assume, I don't know if he'll make that enough, or make that argument. I guess we'll find out. I hope not, because it's a really bad argument, as just the flat amount of hours something has means higher quality. Let's see. In fact, there was a documentary made raking Lucas over the coals for daring to return to the universe he created to tell new stories. See, this is already an extremely vitriolic response to fan response. This is already an extremely bad faith interpretation of things. It's not even like an interpretation. It's just you have set out to denigrate a fan base because you have some kind of animosity towards them, because it seems as if they don't like the things that you like. Their quality standard is not subterranean as yours is. George Lucas, let's be frank, the prequels are not good. None of them. None of the three are good movies. The Revenge of the Sith gets the closest, but it's still not good. The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones are horrible, awful films. And The Revenge of the Sith is, again, also not as good. It's definitely the best of the original three. It's such a dishonest way to phrase it. It's just so, you could just smell the anger wafting out of this sentence. People were incredibly excited to learn that there would be another trilogy coming out. Hell, even I was, and I was quite young at the time, and I remember it. It was a huge deal. More Star Wars movies? That was a huge deal. To say that the documentary made fun of him for daring to return to the universe he created was absolutely ridiculous. And it betrays your motivations in this article. It really is. It's more of an insight into your mindset than maybe you realize. And if you do know that's what it is, then it was foolish to write this. People had a problem with George Lucas because he made a lot of bizarre decisions and he made 3 really bad movies. That's it. George Lucas has some very bizarre storytelling choices, and a lot of people didn't like them. Now, I appreciate the prequels, and I'm glad that they happened, but geez, I kind of, I don't know if I'd re-roll in an alternate universe to get a new trilogy. I probably would, but I'm not sure. I'm not certain. Lucas wanted to keep making the Star Wars story, but he sold the company that bears his name to Disney because he didn't see the point of making new movies only to be chastised by the fan base. Well, you make a massive product, people start to develop a connection to that product based on what it is and the story that it tells and its quality, and then you follow it up and you completely flounder it. I mean, I don't know what to say. You put out a product, people paid money to get this product. I feel like it's totally fair to be chastised if you don't do a good job. It's the nature of putting stuff out. It's like every YouTube video, every movie, every symphony. If you're making something, particularly something that is a product that is to be sold to people, especially with his level of merchandising, I think it's totally fair. And if he doesn't think that he has the talent or capacity, or if he thinks he's too beholden to the opinions of those people, then he has every right to sell it. Unfortunately, it seems that he did, and now we have what we have, and it has been disastrous ever since. Today, we get 6 new hours of Star Wars stories, told twice a year, and the most vocal segment of Star Wars fans couldn't be unhappier. He did it. How does an adult make this argument? How does an adult make this argument? I don't know. Maybe my standards for adults are too high? I don't know. But can you hear my chair squeaking? I'm leaning forwards a bit. I got my paws on the desk here because I'm staying in character, and I got my chair squeaking a bit. Can you hear that? Can you hear it? I'm scooting around with my butt here. I don't know how an adult writes, today we get 6 new, as if you get more hours of Star Wars. Why aren't you happy? You just give people it just a flat. The more hours you get, the better it is. You should be happier. Because nothing's bad. I guess that's it. This has to come from because he's not making quality arguments here. He's not making a quality statement. He is saying you got 6 new hours of Star Wars stories twice a year. Why aren't you happy? Because hours just translates into something good. The more hours you get, the happier you should get. Are you saying I got more hours of Star Wars in 2015 when I got the start of we got the whole sequel trilogy, How many hours is that? 6-ish? I don't know. Let's just say 6. New hours of Star Wars stories in the sequel trilogy, and that was shit, and I wish it never happened. It was terrible. It's awful. Each one of those movies is... I don't even know which one's worse. I would say that The Force Awakens is probably the worst for what it does world-building-wise, and it ruins Han, and it does a lot of damage, immense damage to the world, and even Luke. But I just don't want more hours. It's the peak consumer mindset. Peak consumer. More. Quality be damned. More. I just want to see the things. I just want to see spaceships and lightsabers. And more is the quality. The more you get, the better it is. Quality is its own... No, how do you say it? Quantity is its own quality? It comes from the mindset of somebody who just thinks maybe everything is just good. Everything is amazing. You have no right to complain. I don't know. I feel like every sentence I'm learning more and more about this Patton guy. I'm getting more and more of a look into his mindset, peering into his soul with every word. A part of the Star Wars fandom spends the vast majority of their time trashing everything from the sequels to the new shows. Well, of course, the hyperbolic, the vast majority of their time. Gotta throw that in there. It's all they do. You paint the opposition as a certain way. All they do is trash Star Wars. That's just all they do. They have no lives. They spend the vast majority of their time just pretty classic internet stuff. Unbecoming of an adult, but that's all right. That's okay. It's your article. You can write it however poorly you wish. Luckily for you, there are places like CBR.com who has standards as low as you do. How fortuitous. But let's be frank, right? The sequels are trash. The new shows are trash. For reasons that I have gone into in depth with all of my pals on every frame of pause, right? It's top to bottom, characters, plot, logic, world building. The ability to just tell a decent story seems to be non-existent when it comes to these writers. Name an episode of a show, and I'll tell you a big problem with it. I feel that's where we're at. They don't hire good writers, and if they don't hire good writers, you're not going to get good stories. It's not like we just all sat down one day in our underground bunker on the moon base and said, all right, guys, Disney has purchased Star Wars. Now we're going to hate it. Everything they do, we're just going to come up with reasons to hate it. No, of course not. Every time something comes out, we watch it and we assess its quality with consistent standards. These shows fail to meet those standards. And I know that part of your claim seems to be that our standards are simply too high. Too damn high. But I would say no, I don't think our standards are too high. I just think that the people who write this stuff aren't talented at writing. If you want to get into a discussion on how do we tell the difference between someone who has unrealistically high standards and a series of products that constantly doesn't meet a level of standard, there is a way for us to determine which of those is the case. And I think I could make a damn good, compelling set of arguments, along with everyone on EFAP that we watch these shows with, because we're all quite talented at doing this. We've had lots of experience. That it basically settles the argument right there. Do you know how much we want things to be good? When we watch the first episode of Moon Knight, when we watch the first episode of Kenobi, when we watch the first episode of Boba Fett, we wanted these shows to be good. I want to sit down and watch something good every once in a while. You know, I don't want to just watch crap. And I do enjoy watching bad things. It's fun to riff on them and to pick them apart and to keep myself sharp. But maybe it would be nice to see something good every once in a while. That would be refreshing. And maybe the way that I say that is colored by the fact that I just saw Thor: Love and Thunder recently. And boy, that was a trash fire. All right, where were we? Some do it for reasons disconnected from actual good faith critique and instead seek online clout. Okay, that's a claim. I'm sure there are some people who do that. However, let's be clear. You can do this in the opposite direction. You can seek out online clout and be positive. You can seek out online clout. Seek out online clout. You could do that and focus on being negative. Both of those are things that you can do. There is an audience that exists for both of them. But the audience that we have garnered based around the way that we review this show, we review this show negatively because it is bad. And the audience we get, if all we did was say it's bad and say it's terrible and mentioned horrible arguments, then our audience would leave us. And I would not be keen to welcome in an audience that would replace the one I have now. Because we actually care. And they actually care. And you know what? Size of those audience be damned. Size of those audiences be damned. I should correct myself. I don't want a large audience that's full of doorknob-licking morons who just consume and clap at the flashing lights in pretty colors. It would be much, much better to have a smaller audience who actually did care and could explain why they care and could, I guess, simply be communicated with, who could understand. I'm curious, when he writes this out, he's got someone in mind, right? He's got some people in mind. Because if he didn't have anyone in mind, I feel like he wouldn't write it. And there are they're the obvious people you go to, the obvious names out there that are popular, whether it's our own podcast, EFAP, whether it's specifically like myself, Mahler, Fringy, whether it's like Nerdrotic, whether it's Critical Drinker, Heel vs. Babyface, whether it's there's plenty of people out there. And I'm curious, and I'll probably never know. But I'm curious who in particular he must be thinking about as he writes this, knowing that it's a good idea to not name anyone specific, because specificity, right? Making claims with specificity invites more specific counters. And if you can be ambiguous, in a way that's a bit of a safety net. It's padding to statements you make and claims that you take. Because you can't say, why would you say that about Nerdrotic? Why would you say that about Critical Drinker? Why would you say that about Mahler? Why would you say that about Fringy or EFAP or Az? He'll say, no. I not them. You know, there's people out there. You see? Ambiguity is a defense. That great linguistic smokescreen. What do we have? It's a pattern of toxicity dating back to the prequel trilogy. Instead of Ahmed Best being the Star Wars actor of color harassed by racists, it's Moses Ingram who played the third sister. Of course. See, this is our first example. We gotta go into Moses Ingram's black. So the people who criticize the character are just racists. Very clever. It's very clever. Joshua M. Patton. It's very clever. I haven't heard that one before. Let's just carry on with this. Maybe we'll get ourselves an actual argument we can tackle. Instead of Jake Lloyd under pressure for his portrayal as Anakin, it's young Leia actor Vivian Lyra Blair in the spotlight. As far as I know, Vivian Lyra, is it Lyra? Lyra? I assume it's Lyra. If it's not, then VLB, Vulb. I don't think she's getting any hate. I think she did fine in the show. I don't have any... Obviously, she's acting like they told her to act, right? She did fine, I suppose. She just plays an extremely annoying character that I hate. Obviously, I don't feel anything in any way towards Vivian Lyra Blair. I don't see her getting anything like what Jake Lloyd got. I think he's kind of making this up. He's just saying it's a parallel that you have this young actor in a spotlight, but it seems like he's making a false comparison. Jake Lloyd got a lot of pressure, from what I understand, from his peers. And I also think that he had some other issues. I'm not certain, but I think he had some mental issues, which is very unfortunate. But to take that situation and compare it with what's happening with Vivian Lyra Blair, I didn't even know anything was happening with her. I'm certain that any actor or actress, be they young or old, is necessarily in the spotlight for a show like this. And some people will say mean things, I guess. But I had no idea that these two situations were comparative. These fans feel entitled to having their Star Wars a certain way, and they object to anything that deviates from their expectations. You know, it's really a shame that, we kind of have The Last Jedi to thank for really poisoning the discussion around the subversion of expectations, right? expectations were certainly subverted by The Last Jedi, but they were subverted in one of the worst ways you could. It was a subversion that made everything worse around it. It was not interesting. It was very poorly written. It was badly thought out. It was not well executed. And it has done lasting damage to Star Wars ever since. And now it's become almost a meme in and of itself. Subversion of expectations has practically been memeified as a phrase, unfairly or not, by that movie. And it's the same argument. You just didn't get what you wanted. Well, if something that I want is good, and you do... Let's take the Halo show. The Halo show is fucking trash. The Halo show is like... It makes me upset how terrible it is. If you're curious, by the way, every Frame of Pause episode 187, we talk about the Halo show, and we've got the Act Man, we've got ER, and we have John CJG, the creator of Arby and the Chief, and of course myself, Fringy, and Mahler. And we talk about it for a long time. You should watch that episode if you're curious for all the deets. Anyway, the Halo show isn't bad because it wasn't what I expected, or because it was something that I didn't want, or it was because of it ignored source material. Those aren't the reasons why it's bad. Those are adjacent. But the reason that show was bad was because it was full of really, really bad things. Bad characters, bad writing, nonsense logic. Through and through, that show was trash. Similarly is a great deal of all of this Star Wars material. It's not just what I don't personally want, or at least it ends up being that way. It's just bad in and of itself. But think of all the things out there that you would enjoy and like that you just aren't aware of. How many times in your life do you watch a movie or a show, and you don't really have any expectations for what will happen, but they do something you didn't expect, and it turns out that you really like it? That it's really skillful writing. That there's a lot of craftsmanship in the narrative, and it didn't occur to you that would be what would happen. A lot of the times, I go into movies, and I don't really have much in the way of expectations. I have my guesses and my theories, of course. I think that just happens naturally. But for the most part, in a lot of these shows that I watch, I'm not really expecting certain things. I'm just sort of analyzing what I'm provided. I am more than happy to be surprised. In fact, if it's written well and it makes sense to have things happen a certain way, I love to be surprised. I love to be sort of caught off guard by a clever bit of this or that. Getting back to the article, Lucas could never live up to the prequel hype for them, and Obi-Wan Kenobi is, ironically, suffering the same fate. Hype, of course, does play a role in a lot of expectations that we have. In video games, we encounter this all the time, and I constantly have to tell people, chill, relax. Yes, the trailer looks good. That's the job of the trailer. It's an advertisement. It's a commercial. Temper your expectations. Try to not overhype things so that you end up disappointing yourself. If it's good, it's good. I know it's in our natures to get excited about things that we're really looking forwards to. The same goes for shows. The same goes for new trilogies. Please, I'm not saying have low expectations. I'm saying please keep your expectations in check. And temper those expectations off of preceding qualities. If these Star Wars shows are bad after bad after bad, that's why I have extremely low expectations for what comes next. But when Mike Flanagan, when he announces a new show, I'm like, oh, he did Hill House and Bly Manor, and he did Midnight Mass. These are things that I'm really interested in. My expectations are high because his writing, generally, tends to be really, really good. Could Lucas, and the assertion here is he could never live up to the prequel hype for them. Doesn't really matter, because you can come out with something that's really good and well constructed that people love, regardless of what their expectations were. If you are saying that he could never do that, then essentially what you're implying is that he lacks the ability. He doesn't have the talent necessary to make something that people would like. Expectations be damned, I think. Because even if people's expectations are sky high, there's still a way to please them. People don't necessarily have to have their high expectations met to say that something's good. And having people say that the prequels were good, especially in retrospect, right? It would certainly be an improvement over what most people think of them now. And let's be frank, anyone who's able to look at these shows objectively that Disney's been putting out for Star Wars should not have a very high level of expectations for Kenobi, right? But then again, maybe someone who has really high expectations for Kenobi based on what Disney's been putting out, maybe they have insanely low standards anyway, so they'll probably be pleased. I don't know. A lot of people have extremely inconsistent standards for quality, if they have any of them at all. It's very, very much a subjective affair. Did they think it's cool or did they like it? Without really looking into storytelling aspects, that would make sense. I mean, thus the amount of people who think that Kenobi as a show is anything approaching even mediocre. Let's see, the article goes on. One thing folks wanted when they learned Hayden Christensen would return were flashbacks to the Clone War era. Yeah, I think it's not unreasonable for people to have some flashbacks. I think they would be a very important storytelling tool. Oh, did you hear my ice? My ice fell again in my little Yeti tin. Isn't that fun? But yeah, I don't think that it's unreasonable to have that kind of an expectation, as long as you don't hinge your entire enjoyment or quality assessment on this show needing those flashbacks to be good. I don't think it's unreasonable at all to think that if they're bothering to get Hayden Christensen, that they're going to do some flashbacks. Before I was aware that Darth Vader would be kind of prominent in this show, I assumed that Hayden Christensen's involvement would be exclusively in flashbacks, where we could take advantage of having these actors being able to do things that the prequels sorely lacked in, which is developing the relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. The prequels needed a lot more of this relationship developed, and unfortunately, a lot of what Kenobi as a show probably should have been centered around, which was his relationship with Anakin as he perceived it, and his, I suppose, ruminations on past events, they would be lent a lot of weight by having that relationship further developed for us, the audience. Because you go in expecting certain things on that relationship based on what we would believe to be true. That is to say, we would expect Obi-Wan to have a lot of regrets and thoughts concerning that relationship. And so we kind of, in a way, do a lot of work for the story. We know the way things should be going in, regardless of if they're actually developed on screen. Article. This was never promised in any of the press or marketing for the series, which said the story took place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. Yet fans hyped themselves up that they would get to see a live-action recreation of moments from the Clone Wars animated series. I don't know. I don't personally know about that aspect, and I would take you at your word, but you're a bad faith liar, Mr. Patton, so I can't take your word for it. When they didn't manifest by Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 3, Episode 3, fucking calm down, they felt let down by the storytellers, Lucasfilm and Disney. Not sure why let down's in quotations. I'm sure that a lot of people were let down that we didn't get more of these flashbacks, and really the only one that we got was so-so. I know if I was in charge of the show and I had secured the acting talents of Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, I certainly would have probably put a few more flashbacks as we had some more time to spend with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine as he lies low. I think I wanted to say lay and lie, and I combined those into lie, like aether, lie. But we should have spent more time with Obi-Wan Kenobi, ruminating in his cave in the desert, kind of feeling down, but still doing his duty, exercising and keeping strong in the Force because he knows he has to take care of Luke, potentially in the future. And these are the times where we see in flashbacks, he thinks about the times that he spent with Anakin, he remembers the good times, he remembers the bad times, such is life. Because again, we don't really actually get really much of that at all in the show. The audience brings with them the expectation, not the expectation, that's the wrong word to use, but they bring in what they understand is probably true, and that carries heavily for the story itself and what they actually present in it. How they feel these flashbacks would inform Obi-Wan's character arc is varied or unclear. Well, of course it would be varied, but I think there's plenty of reasonable expectations people would have for what the flashbacks would do. I mean, the flashback, I kind of just spoke about that a moment ago without reading ahead, so we'll let that speak for what it is. They just thought it would be cool. Oh, come on. This is so bad faith. Look, even the people who thought... There's a lot of people who think things are a certain way, even if they're wrong about it. And at least I can give credit to people who are wrong for at least... It's so bad faith. They just thought it would be cool. I'm sure that a lot of them think that it would be meaningful, these supposed scenes. If you took a lot of the people who imagined what the flashbacks would be, and you could sneak inside of their head and be a fly on the wall during their little daydreams about what the potential could be for these flashbacks in a show, surely, I would say most of them would be meaningful in some way, or that they think it would be meaningful. It would be cool, sure. A lot of them could imagine the Obi-Wan and Anakin sparring practices, and maybe we see them on an adventure that they had that wasn't in the prequel movies. There's a lot of stuff you could do that could be cool and could also have back and forth between them. You could have training sessions where Obi-Wan talks to Anakin about the Force and what a Jedi is and what a Jedi's duties are. Those things can be cool and insightful into the characters, and also further develop a meaningful relationship between the two. And to say that all they wanted was just cool stuff, come on, man. Even if they don't have a good grasp on what quality actually is, they think a lot of these things are meaningful. Give them some credit. And it probably would have been, yeah. Yet, when they did get a flashback just to an earlier time in Obi-Wan and Anakin's life, which is what all of flashbacks would be, of course, they complained that the actors didn't get enough digital de-aging in post-production. Really? Is that what your takeaway is on that scene? Is that? Now, I'm not going to keep myself super duper in tuned to what the general population thinks about Star Wars. Whatever vibes I get from that segment of the population, it's often just incidental. But surely the focus on that show, in terms of this section in particular, this flashback sequence, there's no way that the majority of it was focused on not enough de-aging. Of course it was noticed, but I don't think that scene was bad. It certainly wasn't great. I'd say it was fine. It had a confusing message that was really just more of an empty platitude that I don't even think was good advice to give to someone, but I think the acting was fine. The fight scene was fine. I just don't believe you when you say that that it's just a complaint about not enough digital de-aging in post-production. I think that was a minor aspect, generally, that was picked on. And even this next sentence here that I just kind of read, at least on YouTube, these are the same folks who complained about the digital character effects being too much. Lucasfilm can't win for losing. I just think this article is just absolutely inundated. Fun fact, inundated comes from the Latin unda for wave. In the waves. It's you're like swallowed up by water. If you're inundated, you're just you're surrounded by something. In the waves. Point being, fun facts aside, that this article is just swimming in this just seething. It's so bad faith. It's swimming in this just malicious outlook on so many people. The goal of this article is essentially, it's a hit piece against fans that, by the way, I don't even agree with most of the fans who like this. I think the fans who like this are just, I wish they had higher standards. And I think the fans, or really anyone who thinks the show is good, I think they're absolutely, demonstrably incorrect about the quality of this show. See our EFAP episodes on it that have been edited really highly by our crew. They put a lot of work into it, and I think we go to great lengths to explain why this show is bad. I legitimately think that if you think this show is good, watching our episodes will change your mind. I think that. But even this article, it just seems to really seethe that people don't like this crap show. It's a total... See, this show... So far, this article, maybe it gets into it later. I haven't read ahead. Will this article even address issues with the show itself? Explanation as to why things are bad, and maybe counters that, no, it's actually good and well written? Because I don't think it is, because these people avoid actual qualitative assessments of the show like the plague. Strategically, they stay far away from actual discussions of the show. And I wonder how much of that particular disingenuous strategy comes from an understanding that they might actually learn that the show's crap. And they can't do that because they've staked their horse to stake their claim? Rope? What strange combination of metaphors that was. But they have hitched themselves to this idea of what the fandom is. And they build themselves off of this message about what people who don't like this show are as people. It makes character judgments on those people en masse, messily. Do you understand how bad they would look? Not that they don't look bad already, they certainly do, but how extra bad they would look in retrospective to a certain percentage of an audience that they've garnered for themselves if all of a sudden they one day have to say, maybe the show was bad. They would have to admit that maybe there are reasons why people could think this show is bad, even though I spend all this time and effort trying to paint character judgments onto people who didn't like the show. If you spend all this time saying if you don't like the show, you're a racist, sexist bigot, or if you don't like the show, that you have unreasonable expectations, or you're just a bad Star Wars fan, or blah, 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 and then it turns out, oh, actually, the show is bad, but I don't like it because of the quality of the show, things in the show itself, because of the writing. It's definitely not for all the reasons that I painted people who don't like the show about. No, it's not that. It creates a very, very messy kind of messaging. It's certainly safer for them to just coast right on ahead with this messaging, just like the last guy I covered, that organized chaos guy. He'll never change his mind. He's not open to having his mind change. He'll never change his mind. He can't. I have never staked myself to any piece of media, oddly as it is, or as it might seem, but I've never staked myself personally to a piece of media in the way that these people stake themselves personally to these shows. Doubly unusual considering that I clearly know these shows inside and out far better than they do. Yet rather than just a cool flashback to a fun The Clone Wars moment, the scene we get is historic in Star Wars. Before we progress, the flashback that takes place in Kenobi Episode 5 is not from The Clone Wars, it is from Attack of the Clones, namely, before The Clone Wars even begins. So, I mean, look, it's a minor thing. But remember how we just said a moment ago that I think this show is crap, but even I know it better than these people do? This is case in point right there. They love it, I hate it, but it seems like it just so happens to be that the person who hates the show knows it better than the people who love it. Interesting! But let's progress. This is the first time viewers have been privy to Darth Vader's inner life. Firstly, I don't think that's true. I would say that seeing him unhelmeted for the first time in his meditation chamber is part of his inner life. However, if an aspect of the show was to try and give us anything meaningful or quality related to Darth Vader's inner monologue or inner life, I think that it certainly failed in that regard. The article says, sure, the Darth Vader comics spend time in the Sith Lord's head, but never the films or cartoons. Vader is constantly staring out into the blackness of space, and this is the first time we get to see what he's thinking about. I think you should have probably written this a whole lot better, because the claim that you're making is that in all of the original trilogy and in the Revenge of the Sith, we don't know anything about what Vader's thinking. We don't have any scenes where Vader tells us what he's thinking, where he tries to convince people of things, where we never get his perspective. I'm certainly not ready to make that claim, though you are, of course, free to. However, let's just for the sake of argument, and because this is already a long video, let's give you that. Let's say that this show, Kenobi, was the first time we've ever been really introduced to the concept that we're learning about what Vader is thinking of. I think the show did a very bad job executing that concept, and overall, this show showed Vader to be very incompetent and stupid. It's almost a bit of a, what would you call it, a bit paradoxical, because it wants to have its moments where he is insanely powerful with the Force, and he's doing things that, listen, I would strongly advise against. Moments where he can use the Force to such a degree that he could pull down starships and things of that nature, where he can use the Force to rip apart the hulls of spaceships. I would not be giving him that kind of power. However, at the same time, the show also wants us to believe that it is his incredibly stupid decision-making that allows for the rebellion, essentially, to escape when he has them in his grasp. The Grand Inquisitor, even on the bridge of the Star Destroyer in the show, tells him that we need to stamp out the rebellion. It's really important that we do that. And even though Darth Vader is sitting on a ship that has all of these TIE fighters and personnel and these big guns and cannons and whatnot, he says, no, you guys just wait here doing fucking nothing while I take my ship alone to go and confront Kenobi. Vader is a brain-dead moron in the Kenobi show. It is through his incompetence that the rebellion survives. Back to the article. He and Obi-Wan both reflect on that training session, and instead of besting his old master, Anakin is too caught up in his emotions and desire for victory. So, in our EFAP watch-through of this in Episode 5, this is a very strange message that I don't think anyone in their right minds, certainly no one wise, I think, could... If the message here is that focusing too much on victory is bad, I don't see how you can translate that into anything that you could use in your life. The message of, you didn't win, Anakin, because you're too focused on winning, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It seems to imply that if you weren't so focused on winning that you would win. I think that many decades of professional sports proves to us that that is absolutely not the case at all. Being focused on a singular goal of the victory, of putting everything you can towards that goal, it doesn't make you less likely to achieve that goal. That's a very bizarre message, and the show by no means was able to elaborate that, or whatever it was trying to really say, in any way that's meaningful. That fight scene flashback between Anakin and Obi-Wan is also pretty, considering that it suffers from the writing aspect of, you have a fight and characters simply don't do things in that fight that they could be doing to win that fight because the writers just say that the characters don't do those things. For instance, when a lightsaber gets knocked out of their hand or they lose their lightsaber and the other person says, "See, you're unarmed," and because I guess they forgot that Anakin and Obi-Wan both have telekinesis and they could summon swords, things like that. Anyway, the article goes on. Only instead of talking about how this adds layers to A New Hope's subtext, people are angry at how Reva executed her assassination attempt, or the fact that they think Vader should have been able to stop the second transport as well. The episode is a tragic study in the relationship of these two characters, and some fans nitpicked it to death. Alright, that was pretty cancerous. Let's start at the top and work our way down. Only instead of talking about how this adds layers to A New Hope subtext. So, that bit links to another article that Mr. Patton has written, called Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 3 Changes A New Hope's Lightsaber Battle for the Better. The fight against Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 3 may not have been epic, but it does give Star Wars fans a new take on A New Hope's fight. On the off chance that Mr. Patton had anything resembling insight to tell me, I went ahead and read this article, and I promise you, you can double check if you wish, the article name is there. It is a waste of your time. I will not be addressing it. What it has done, however, it has showed me that it doesn't matter what crap and how badly they can execute a concept in a Star Wars property, a Disney property, there will be people who will do their best to try and scrape some kind of a positive aspect out of it, of how, oh, actually, it isn't bad, it really does da-da-da-da-da. I find this attitude in one way admirable, but in most ways depressive. The article says that people are angry at how Reva executed her assassination attempt, or the fact that they think Vader should have been able to stop the second transport as well. Well, considering that both of these things are insanely important to the story, yeah, I would imagine that a lot of people are fairly focused on these happenstances. Both of the events that are written about here occur consecutively in the episode, so we'll go ahead and address them in relationship to how they actually occur, not how they're written here. This show gives Darth Vader the insane ability to pull a starship down to the planet after it tries to take off. It then shows that he's capable of ripping apart the hull of this spaceship with the Force, and it seems to be a somewhat effortless process. In the prequel trilogy, George Lucas made sure to let us know that it was a somewhat difficult and strenuous thing for Yoda to stop some boulders from falling on his head in Episode 2. But it seems we have strayed far from those days. Despite these incredible displays of power in the Force, Vader watches as the second ship simply leaves with what is the rebellion. He doesn't even make an attempt to stop them, even though he seemingly effortlessly stopped the first one, and at a moment's notice, too. If Vader had done to that second ship what he did to the first, well, the plot would have been drastically changed. And there doesn't seem to be any real explanation as to why he allowed that second ship to leave when he stopped the first so vociferously? In a loud and forceful manner? Yeah, I think that makes sense. If anything, this sort of betrays the message that the episode is trying to say, that he's really trying to get after Kenobi, and he's very impatient. If Vader feels these things about Kenobi, and he realizes that Kenobi is actually on the other ship, not the decoy, why is he not making more of an effort to stop him? Even if he doesn't succeed, but he tries, that would certainly go a long way to explaining why the second ship gets to leave and the first one doesn't. So do you see how discussions of these mechanics in terms of how they affect the plot also relate to the message that the episode's trying to give us? We have a counter, right? It's having a conflict with itself, and that's not good writing. Now let's go to the second thing, Reva's attempted assassination attempt on Vader. Reva mysteriously disappears from this entire scene until Vader has had his Forcey moment. If Reva's entire setup here, set up by Kenobi, and it's her goal, if her whole plan was to kill Vader here, why did she wait until Vader was without distraction? Why didn't she strike Vader from behind when he was focusing on pulling down the ship, or pulling it apart? She was right with him moments ago, but she just disappears. She's nowhere to be seen. What was she doing? This was her entire focus. This damages her character because it makes her look stupid, and it makes the writers look incompetent because they couldn't actually think of a reason, so she's just magically not present in the scenes where she should be enacting her plan. By enacting her plan, it's far more likely, in fact, it's quite likely, that she would have been able to kill Vader. But she doesn't, so Vader gets to keep living, which has insane plot impact. I know, Monsieur Patton, that you would like to think that we're just a bunch of whiny crybabies bitching into the ether. But I promise you, a lot of us have reasons for why we complain about the things we're complaining about. You being dismissive about those reasons and failing to understand them, and I would probably guess, not even attempting to try and find out those explanations, it doesn't make you look better. It makes you look worse. Far worse. And writing dime store articles on a website like this makes them look worse because it shows their bar for quality is so low. And what a privilege it is that they pay you to do so. It also seems that once again we have to have a discussion about what a nitpick is. I don't mind saying it again, it's not gonna take us but a moment. A nitpick is a legitimate criticism of a flaw in a film, and that flaw impacts the characters and the plot in a substantial way. The two examples that have just been listed in this very article are not nitpicks. If Reva is successful in her assassination of Darth Vader, the plot of Star Wars changes significantly with Darth Vader being dead. And if Darth Vader is able to stop the second transport with the Proto-Rebellion and Obi-Wan Kenobi on board, who knows what the plot would do to try and reconcile that event. The article goes on. Now that the series is complete, some fans will surely recognize that many of their complaints weren't Star Wars plot holes or canon-breaking story moments, but intentional story points meant to make you ask those questions. The first link leads us to yet another CBR article, this one by Jamie Parker, called Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 5 Cleverly Fixes an Infamous A New Hope Plot Hole. Now, before I started to read this article, because I'm willing to read these trash-tier articles for you, the viewer, because really no one should subject themselves to the low-tier content of CBR.com, clearly. But before I read this article, I played the guessing game, and I wondered, what is the infamous plot hole in A New Hope that they are referring to? Particularly one that Kenobi fixes. And Kenobi does a lot of things, and fixing plot holes is the last among them. Despite Jamie Parker telling us that Obi-Wan Kenobi has taken a lot of care in making sure that the Star Wars canon stays intact. Only quality on CBR.com. But I wondered, what is this plot hole that Kenobi supposedly fixes? This infamous A New Hope plot hole. And so I had my guess, and I read the article, and I mean, it's a little embarrassing. But the article doesn't say what the infamous plot hole is. Even though it's kind of it's hard to describe, I suppose, how stupid you have to be as a writer to title your article that Kenobi fixes an infamous New Hope plot hole, but you don't tell us what that infamous plot hole is. It really is just amateur shit. I mean, I don't know how you make these kinds of mistakes. You get paid for this. I mean, hopefully not much, because it's certainly not worth any money, but jeez. In the article, you see the title, you could Google it if you want to double check. It's just the kind of thing, maybe I just expect better. This other link here, canon breaking story moments, it links to another CBR article by Mark Million, and it's shit. They're all shit. It's all crap. It's all shit. Do not waste your time. This second link leads to an article that Mark Million writes about how you can interpret all the things in Kenobi as, no, they're not definitely canon breaks or plot holes. No, if you yeah, fuck off. Recall that Joby Harold, who was the writer for the Kenobi episodes, he didn't know that Obi-Wan knew that Anakin was Darth Vader. That's why the reveal in episode 2 of the show makes no fucking sense whatsoever. Anakin's Darth Vader. Yeah, of course Anakin's Darth Vader. In episode 3, you literally watched the hologram of Sidious granting him the title of Darth Vader. You watched this with you were there, Obi. It's the people who write this show, very talented people. They're in good company with the people who write on CBR. So, there is emotional context now, meaning that rewatching earlier episodes will make things like Darth Vader leaving Obi-Wan Kenobi alive make more sense. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? Episode 5 relies on Vader really wanting to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi and get Obi-Wan Kenobi, and yet apparently in episode 3 when they meet, I guess Patton here is saying that Darth Vader allowed him to leave, even though, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. He says Obi-Wan is everything. He's the only thing that matters. It is a classic attempt by people trying to defend horrifically bad writing. Let's just skip ahead. This is not to suggest that any Star Wars story is perfect or impossible to critique. I don't recall anyone saying that Star Wars was perfect, but okay. The revelation that Reva was an Order 66 survivor should have been in that first scene. Obi-Wan Kenobi opened on the Order 66 massacre at the Jedi Temple, teasing something that was eventually confirmed. Yet had the story followed Reva up until the moment a pristine-faced Anakin Skywalker stabbed her, viewers might have been able to latch onto the character a little easier. This way, the reveal that she was, in fact, trying to kill Vader would have more impact because the audience wouldn't already be caught up reacting to her origin. No, the problem with Reva, there are many problems with Reva, right? But the most relevant issue here is that her origin doesn't really make much sense. Let's say that, and let's get this out of the way. We all knew it was Reva, right? This was not a clever reveal. We all knew it was her. Like, everyone guessed. It was kind of embarrassing how quick everyone guessed. However, that aside, Reva gets stabbed by Anakin in Order 66. And I guess they think she's dead, and somehow she played dead, and they didn't get rid of the body, and they didn't find her, and she was able to survive that. And then somehow, despite that, she was able to become a Sith Inquisitor, even though Darth Vader says that he knew that she had survived Order 66 and wanted revenge. And it meant that in all that time of her becoming an Inquisitor and carrying out Inquisitor duties, she was going around and killing and torturing innocent people. Do you see how this doesn't work? Like, in terms of basic logic, of course, but in terms of character, Reva is a horrible, terrible, villainous person, and Obi-Wan should have fucking killed her on Tatooine when he had the moment. In her personal quest for revenge, she killed and tortured untold amounts of people. And God knows what else she did. Anyway, geez, we're at the hour mark. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. I'm tired of diving too deep into more than this crap article deserves. Before Obi-Wan Kenobi dropped, fans said they wanted to see the story of how the character processed the death of the Jedi Order and found the hope he needed to step up when the Force brought Luke to his doorstep. And by the way, I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in seeing that, but that would involve a pensive, well-written character study about a man who is actually dealing with that grief, dealing with those emotions in that situation. But in Kenobi, you get maybe a third of an episode, and that's being generous, maybe a third of an episode actually dealing with that, and they don't even really do it in a substantive way. So if that's what you wanted, this is not at all what you're going to get. And if you think that's what you got, then maybe in a way your ability to be fooled so easily is a little enviable. You must lead a charmed existence. They said they wanted flashbacks to the prequel era for a hit of that tragic nostalgia for Obi-Wan and Anakin's doomed friendship. The show they got delivered all... The show they got delivered all this and more, and yet it's just not enough for some of them. Their Star Wars has to be perfect or it's trash. We don't want perfection. You see, Mr. Patton, not all of us are like you, who have subterranean levels of expectations, who have standards who are as low as the standards of the CBR. There was a time, decades ago, but there was a time when Star Wars was a well-written series. And now, I mean, if Kenobi is, it's legitimately one of the worst things I've ever seen. The plot holes and the breaks in logic, the character assassinations, the ridiculous story nonsense, it's horrible. And the fact that people can go and get paid money to just try and shill for it like this. I mean, again, part of me is depressed at that fact, and another part of me is ecstatic that we live in such a wonderful society that allows people to make their livings doing it, so I suppose you take the good with the bad in that regard. We are not asking for perfection, and it's not a dichotomy, perfection and trash. We want something that's competent. We want something that's fine. We just want something that isn't terrible. If the series, all in all, turned out to be a 5 out of 10, middle-of-the-road, totally average venture, then, I mean, I'd be kind of pleased with that, especially since the sequels were terrible, the Mandalorian show was awful, the Boba Fett show was a catastrophe. I would have been incredibly pleased and shocked if this show turned out to just be mediocre. But it is clear the people who are in charge of making these productions, they just want to tell their own story. They just want to tell their own stories. I want to tell a story where Obi-Wan learns that Anakin is Darth Vader. I was like, yeah, but in episode 3, he already knew that. He literally watched he watched Sidious call him Darth Vader. I mean, he saw that. It's too bad. That's fine. I don't have to know that sort of thing. I want to tell my story, and I'm going to use this beloved IP in order to do that. Plot holes be damned. Continuity be damned. It's perfectly okay to not like something. All art is inherently subjective anyway. That depends on how you define art. We won't even get into that can of worms. This person clearly does not have the mental faculties ready for that discussion. Yet, one has to wonder if the Star Wars fans out there aren't letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. There's more Star Wars content out than ever before. There is plenty out there to like if only you let yourself. So, let's wrap this up and let's go ahead and address these final parting sentences. Well, I guess the final sentence is, give Obi-Wan Kenobi a second chance now that the entire first season is available on Disney+. Not a shill site, but alright. You don't choose the things that you like. You don't really. Do you know what doxastic involuntarism is? It's the philosophical and psychological position that a person doesn't choose the things that they believe, right? You don't choose the things that your brain accepts as true, and you don't choose in the same way the things that you like. The things that you like are not, it's not just a switch that you actively say, I will like this, I will not like this, I will like this, I will not like that. It's not that simple. Whether you like something, much like whether or not you believe something, is a result. It is a result of its elements as they are presented to you. It's a result of the information that you have, your personality, the things that you know, your preferences. A lot of things go into producing that final result. I don't like the Kenobi show because the Kenobi show is full of many, many terrible elements. Things that don't make sense, canon breaks, bad acting, unwise design decisions. My brain, when I see Obi-Wan Kenobi taking someone as a meat shield, I don't like that. Not because I just say I don't like that and that's just what my brain accepts as reality. Our minds don't work like that. It's because I understand that this is a violation of who we know him to be, and because this cements him as a rather villainous person. When I see him sparing Darth Vader at the end of the series, I don't just say, I'm not going to like that, and my brain accepts that as true. It's because I know what Darth Vader is, and I know what Obi-Wan Kenobi is allowing to happen with his moral cowardice. When he explicitly says in this show, whether Darth Vader dies or I do, this ends today, and yet he doesn't kill Darth Vader when he can and ends his reign of terror across the galaxy, I don't like that. I think that the existence of the prequels today, right, and how they are seen, is an incredible, obvious refutation of this concept that Star Wars fans aren't letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. The prequels are fairly well beloved, even though they're often regarded as being bad films. I think all three of them are bad, the first two particularly bad. But I appreciate them, they have high meme quality, and I think that their fans don't take them too seriously. I like the prequels, and I think they're bad. And there are reasons for both of those things. I like Batman and Robin. I know it's bad. When you say, I know I wouldn't mention it, but maybe I could wrap this up with a quick little at the end. When you say that all art is inherently subjective anyway, why do you and the people that you link to on CBR.com, why do all these trash, amateur-ass articles try so hard to explain why, no, it's not actually a canon break. No, this isn't character assassination. But guys, it makes total sense. Why are you trying to appeal to rather objective measurements when all art it's inherently subjective anyway? How come in order to try and change minds, you appeal to objective things if all art is inherently subjective anyway? And I'm not saying that you don't have an answer to this. In fact, I imagine that if you ever watch this and hear this question, you probably could come up with an answer. But I think that your exploration of that answer might be something worth considering. Because you don't choose what you like, and you don't choose what you believe. Thank you, everybody, if you made it this far. An hour and almost 10 minutes now. I really do appreciate it if you made it all the way through this. I know I'm long-winded. It's sort of my thing. I hope you enjoyed it, and I apologize that it's taken so long for me to get some stuff out lately. I've been a busy doggo. I would, of course, appreciate all of your patronage and support, but I'm more than happy that you're here at all to give my video your time, a valuable asset. So, until we meet again, goodbye, ciao. I'll see you later.